It's off to Amber Briggles. We get this party started.
Hey y'all, wow, there's a lot of you. Holy cow, that's awesome. My name is Amber Briggle. I live here in Denton and I love Texas. I love it. I love the diversity of Texas. Look at y'all. We are such a great representation of this state. I love the food. I love those incredible sunsets we see. And yes, I love the heat. I can't help it. I just do. I love the heat. I'm a small business owner, and I love the hardworking, bootstrapping independence of Texans just like me. But the reality is that if we don't elect Beto O'Rourke as our next governor, my family may need to leave this state. The reality is I am a parent of a transgender teenager. Yeah. He's kind of the best, but he's at school right now, so he couldn't be here. But I'm a mother who, despite loving my children unconditionally and providing for their every need, was investigated by Child Protective Services earlier this year for child abuse, thanks to Greg Abbott. But let me back up, because this CPS investigation did not begin the moment that caseworker rang my doorbell. It began in 2017 when the Texas legislature, led by Greg Abbott, attempted to pass dozens of anti-LGBTQ bills, most of which put a target on the backs of vulnerable transgender children like my son. The years since have only gotten more cruel, more inhumane, and more trans kids have suffered this trauma as a result. Every legislative session just gets worse and worse. Last year in 2021, the last time that this Republican majority legislature met, there were over 70 anti-LGBTQ bills filed. These were not bills filed to fix our grid or fund our schools or stop the epidemic of gun violence. These were bills targeting children. One bill was particularly atrocious, and if it would have passed, thankfully it didn't, if it would have passed, it would have labeled my husband Adam and myself as child abusers. It would have taken both of my children out of, It would have taken both of my children out of our loving, safe, nonviolent, drug-free home, put them in an underfunded, overworked, and broken foster care system, and put my husband and I in prison for 10 years. Our crime? Because I love my transgender son to the moon and back. That's my crime. Yeah. Fortunately, that bill did not pass. But a few months later, our worst nightmare came true. Because without any legal standing whatsoever, Greg Abbott directed CPS to investigate families like me anyway. Within days, I had a CPS caseworker in my home, on my couch, interrogating myself, my husband, and my 2 children alone and individually. Let's go, Beto. As governor, Greg Abbott was elected to protect Texans and make our lives better. Instead, he sent a government employee from an already underfunded and overworked agency into my home to traumatize my kids, and they are still in therapy. And this is what I need you to understand. I want everyone in this room to understand this. This legislature is going to reconvene in just a couple of months, and this bill, and bills even worse, will be on the agenda. And if we don't have an ally like Beto in the governor's seat to stop this bill, thanks to gerrymandering and voter suppression, I'm concerned it will pass. And then my family will be faced with 2 choices. One, stay in the state, have my family torn apart, and my freedom taken away because I would be in prison. Or 2, leave the state that I love and everything behind and be an internally displaced American thanks to Greg Abbott and his inhumane policies. Beto O'Rourke believes in a better Texas. He is going to fight for all Texans, not just my family, but yours too, because I can promise you this. If Greg Abbott hasn't come after your family yet, he will. You know why? He is so incompetent at doing his job, he would rather point the finger and the blame and the fear anywhere else than actually fix the damn grid or fund our schools. Beto O'Rourke is the governor that we need. He has a plan to fully fund our public schools. He has a plan to help small business owners like me. He has a plan to fix the damn grid. He has a plan to stop the gun violence epidemic that is killing 4,000 Texans a year. He has a plan to restore your right to reproductive freedom and your bodily autonomy. And it's going to take all y'all to do this. I am counting on you. I'm begging you as a mom at risk of losing everything. I am asking you to vote for Beto O'Rourke for governor, for Mike Collier for lieutenant governor, for Rochelle Garza for attorney general, and every Democrat up and down the ballot. Thank you so much for your support, for supporting our next governor and my most favorite dinner guest, Beto O'Rourke. I'd like to introduce up next the Honorable Congressman Colin Allred. Thank you for being here.
Well, everybody, just thank Amber for telling us her story. You know, I've got 2 young boys, and I can't imagine anything more personal than talking about my kids and what they're going through, and to have your state attack your family. So, Amber, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We need to hear that because it's real people behind these policies. It's real people behind the actions that they're taking right now. Listen, through the magic of gerrymandering, I now represent part of Denton County, or will. I didn't have any say in it. I see some of y'all here who helped us flip a seat in 2018 from red to blue in Dallas. We beat a 22-year incumbent in a seat that the national media said could not be won. There was never a public poll that showed me winning that race at any point before I won by 6.5 points on Election Day. I'm just telling you. So don't worry about the polls. It's not about the polls, it's about people. I know a little something about flipping a district. People used to come up to me and say, Colin, can you do it? Can you win this seat? And I say, it's not about whether I can do it. It's not going to be just me versus my opponent. It's about whether we can do it. So what are we going to do together to make sure that our community is reflected on election night? Because, you know, we all remember how we felt the morning after the election in 2016. Everybody remembers. Because it wasn't that a Republican had won. That wasn't the issue. It was that we felt like someone who didn't believe in our country had been elected to be the next president of the United States. And then we remember how we felt when they announced that Joe Biden was going to be the next president of the United States and had knocked him out of the White House. But there was so much work that went into that. It's great that we can all gather here. Listen, I was raised not far from here by a single mother who was a public school teacher. My mom taught in Dallas public schools for 27 years. It's incredible that in our community, in our country, someone who grew up like I did can stand here in front of you as a member of Congress and tell you and talk to you about the next governor of the state of Texas. That's who we are as a community, a place where when we invest in each other, amazing things can happen. But campaigns and getting out there and flipping our state from red to blue, it's not just going to be about getting Democrats out to vote. It's going to be about the folks who don't feel like they're being reflected by this version of the Republican Party out to vote too. It's about having those hard conversations. Because, you know, it's not right that when my wife flies with me and our 2 boys to D.C. and I go to do my work in Congress, that when she lands there, she has more rights when she lands in D.C. than in the state where we live, where we own our home, where our kids go to school. It's not right. It's not right what's happening in our state. It's not right that we have to wake up and be embarrassed by our state government, that it's a new terrible thing happening every single week. You don't even know if there's anyone paying attention to you, listening to you, if there's anyone that's going to be an advocate for you. That's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not how it's been. This is new for us. This is a new low, and it's not because Republicans are in charge of our state. It's because cowards are in charge of our state. They are afraid of the extremists in their party. They won't stand up to them, and if they do, if someone does in their party, they kick them out, like they did to my colleague Liz Cheney. They don't want to hear that we're a democracy in which every voice should be heard. Now, you might win some elections, you might lose some. That's not what they want to hear. This is about power. They're not pro-life, they're pro-control. They want to control women's bodies. They're not pro-freedom. You're not free when I have to worry when I drop my little kids off. My youngest son is 1.5. He waddles into the school. After Uvalde, at his school, where my other son also goes, they had increased the security there. And as I was dropping my kids off, I saw all the other parents with the same look that I had, which was, what if today it's our school? What if my little diaper butt is in the wrong place at the wrong time? Because we don't have leadership in our state that will do anything to protect them. So our school has to hire folks who are standing out there with guns. When I went to Hillcrest High School, not far from here, to walk through metal detectors just to get in, because we don't have leadership here that will take common sense steps to protect our kids, to save lives. We have, as I know Beto's going to talk about, we live in the energy capital of the world. For a week, we had neighbors of ours having to burn their fences because they didn't have power. And the next legislative session, what do they come back and do? Do they get to work on the hard work of finding bipartisan legislation to fix the problems for our community? Or do they go after trans kids? Because that's going to be the biggest issue for us going forward. It's ridiculous. But you know the great thing about American democracy, the thing that makes it the most special democracy in the world, is that every couple of years we get to say something about it. We don't have to accept it. The issue for us in Texas is not that we're a red state. It's that we're a non-voting state. And there are a lot of reasons for that. After I played in the NFL for 5 years, where I was a linebacker, my job was to put big people on the ground. I became a voting rights lawyer. And I know what the hurdles are in the way of an 18-year-old graduating from a DISD school like I did, and Beto does too, who wants to go vote. He just wrote a whole book about it. Who wants to go cast their ballot. The hoop they have to jump through just to get registered. The hoop they have to jump through to make sure they have a photo ID to present when they go to the polling place. The fact that their vote might be diluted because of a gerrymandered district. The fact that someone's going to try and kick them off the voter rolls after the election or in between the election. So they don't even know if they show up, they're still going to be registered. All of those things. We know what voter suppression does. But the great thing about our democracy is that we can overcome it together. We can overcome it together. We don't have to put up with this, Texas. This is not who we are. So don't come to this rally. Don't come to this rally and just cheer for Beto. Don't come to this rally and just say, I'm happy to have you entertain me for the afternoon. Come here and recommit yourself to our democracy. It is not a spectator sport. We have to all be engaged. We got to get out there and knock on some doors. We got to get out there and make some phone calls. We got to make sure that Beto O'Rourke is the next governor of the great state of Texas. Beto, let's go.
Man, that was good. That was your best. That was awesome. Denton, how are we doing? This gives me some hope. At a moment that I think many of us, because I've listened to you, desperately need it. Everything that Amber just described that Colin reminded us of, these are among, if not the most dark days in the history of this state, at least during our lifetimes. The attacks that we are under, the freedoms that we cherish, the protections that we once thought were guaranteed, that have been removed by those in the highest positions of power and public trust. The very literal darkness that befell this state 18 months ago, when the lights would not stay on, when the heat stopped running, and because your pipes froze, the water was no longer flowing. The way that you and I and these extraordinary leaders who are with us today have chosen to meet this moment gives me hope, renews my faith, my sense of optimism that together, the Republicans who are here, and you're welcomed among us, the Democrats that are in this crowd, we're glad you're here as well, independents, voters and non-voters alike, some of you too young to be able to cast your ballot, but you're going to make sure at this defining moment of truth that you stand and that you are counted. The way that we've chosen to meet this moment, I believe, will define us. Not just for those of us here in this room today, those beyond those walls, but the generations to come who are counting on us, who do not have a vote or a voice in this election, but through our actions and how we resolve to meet this challenge, the greatest that we've ever faced. And listen, I don't blame you if at times you are tempted to despair. It's only human, given what we're up against right now. But the action of being together, of deciding that, as Colin just reminded us, we're not on the sidelines, we're in this game. This is a government of, by, and for the people. And though the challenges have come from afar, the answers to them are right here among us. We understand, we are fully aware and conscious of the fact that we are in the fight of our lives. And we're literally fighting for the lives of our fellow Texans. We cannot be found wanting. They are counting on us. We are counting on one another. And when I see you here, filling this room to capacity, we just learned that there are hundreds of others who are outside who could not get in today. I want to make sure that they hear us loud and clear. Not only are we in the fight of our lives, but we are going to fight like hell. We are going to give them hell. We are going to win this election on the night of November 8th. We're going to do it for each other. We're going to do it for Texas. We're going to come through. And I know that we're going to win because we are fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. I know that we're going to win because we prioritize the lives of our kids before the NRA, the gun lobby, or any special interest in this state. Thank you, moms. I know that we're going to win because we've committed ourselves to treating every public school educator with the dignity and respect that they deserve because our future literally depends on it. And I know that we're going to win because we believe in this democracy and the right to vote. And though we understand that this is the most voter-suppressed, voter-intimidated state in the union today, through no fault of present company, in fact, Jasmine Crockett joined her other Democratic colleagues, left the floor of the House here in Texas to deny that anti-democracy majority a quorum, even left the state risking their jobs, potentially arrest, to stand up and fight for this democracy at its moment of truth. We must follow their lead, and we will. I know that we're going to win because we believe that you should freely and fairly be able to cast that ballot and choose that person who will represent and serve you free of obstruction, suppression, and intimidation. And I know that after we win, not only will we make changes like making sure we have automatic and same day and online voter registration, not only Will we reopen the hundreds of closed polling places, the vast majority of which were closed in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods? But I promise you this, together, we are going to replace Confederate Heroes Day as a state holiday with Election Day as a state holiday so you can take the day off and vote. We're going to win this. We're going to win this, and we're going to do it together. And listen, for those who could not get in today, for those who you're going to talk to a little bit later this afternoon, your folks, your kids, your siblings, your colleagues, your classmates, your neighbors, the folks that you interact with whom you've never met online and through social media, they may ask you, listen, I know that Beto came to Denton today. I know that you went out to hear him. What is this guy all about? And what are we up against right now? Why would I change horses right now midstream in the state of Texas? Well, listen, this is the other reason I know that we're going to win. It's because we're running against Greg Abbott, who has failed the state of Texas at every single turn. We may be fighting with and for one another. He's fighting against us, bringing us down, attacking the very people he's supposed to serve. Let me give it to you by the numbers. It's been 13 days since Greg Abbott's total abortion ban, with no exception for rape and no exception for incest. A ban that begins at conception went into effect. This is in a state that leads much of the nation, if not the developed world, in the rate of maternal mortality, because as you close down one reproductive health care clinic after another, you are also foreclosing the opportunity to get a cervical cancer screening, to see a family planning provider, to see a doctor of any kind in the least insured state in America. That maternal mortality crisis, 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas. Not only is he denying the women of this state their constitutionally protected right, he's going to kill them through his cruelty and through his incompetence and through his failure to see that what he's doing is going to cost lives, not save them. You may have seen the press conference when he signed this cruel bill into law, and the reporter asked, Governor Abbott, may I ask, you recognize that there's no exception for rape. Are you going to force that woman to carry her rapist baby to term? The governor says, don't worry about it. We're going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you more rapes have been committed in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. The ability to bring a perpetrator to justice under Greg Abbott's last 7.5 years has fallen by half. And there are 3,000 untested rape kits at DPS headquarters right now collecting dust. When it comes to law and order, when it comes to fully funding law enforcement, when it comes to preventing crime, Greg Abbott has failed the people of Texas, and he's killing the women among us right now. I want you to remember that. But there's an answer to that. We go out and meet the voters where they are, at their front doors, right here in Denton, in neighboring Collin, in Tarrant, in Dallas counties. We show up for them and give them a reason to vote. We invite them into this very democracy that they've been shut out from by the governor and the Republican majority. And I tell you what, those millions of eligible but non-voting Texans after this last election, they start to come in. And when we put this before them, as it was put before the voters in Kansas, a referendum on a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body. We win this election. We restore those protections. We ensure that women can make their own decisions going forward. Are you with me on this? Let's do this. I want to give you another number. It has been 1 day and 15 weeks since 19 children and their 2 teachers were slaughtered in the very classrooms that they attended day in, day out. 15 weeks and 1 day from when Greg Abbott held a press conference, described that there had been a shooting that day in Uvalde, Texas, and then faced a choice about what he was going to do next. He could go directly south from where he was in Abilene, Texas, and be with those grieving families, some of whom were still awaiting word about their children, some who had yet to identify the bodies of their kids, because the only way they could do it was through a DNA swab or identifying the shoes that those children were wearing. Those kids defenseless both against an 18-year-old who's able to legally purchase not one, but 2 AR-15s, hundreds of rounds of ammunition. But those kids defenseless against a governor who, after one mass shooting after another, has failed to lift a finger to protect the children and the people of this state. That governor at that moment, instead of traveling down to Uvalde, traveled 300 miles in the opposite direction on a private jet to go to a fundraiser and talk to campaign contributors and donors instead of the people who needed that man the most. And since then, for a governor who's called a special session to target transgender children, a governor who's called a special session to target teachers under the guise of critical race theory, a governor who's called special session after special session to weaken our voting laws and the right to vote, could not be bothered over these 15 weeks to call a special session to make it less likely that your kid or our 3 who are at school in El Paso are going to be any less likely to meet the same fate as those 19 children in Uvalde. But we have an answer to that. We knock on those doors of those voters. We bring them out. We win this election. We bring legislators, Republicans and Democrats alike, around the table, and we say, look, we may not be able to agree on all points, but we've traveled this state together. We've listened to gun owners, non-gun owners alike, those kids who are counting on us right now, and at a minimum, let us raise the age of purchase from 18 to 21 for an AR-15 or an AK-47. At a minimum, let us have a red flag law so we can intervene before it is too late. And at a minimum, let us have a universal background check so that if you buy a firearm, we can be assured that you're not a danger to yourself or to anyone else. 15 weeks and 1 day, we should not, and the families in Uvalde should not, have to wait a day longer. But I'll tell you what, it's 2 months and 1 day until November 8th. This one is on us, right? This one we win together. Another number for you, 18 months since the person in the highest office of power could not keep the power on for the people that he purported to serve. In the energy capital of the world, as Congressman Allred just reminded us, not for minutes, not for hours, but for days, people were freezing in their homes, and not just freezing as a matter of speech, but freezing to death. Conroe, Texas, an 11-year-old boy whose mom could not pile enough blankets across his shivering body was found frozen to death the next morning. In another county, a 75-year-old Vietnam-era veteran, this guy, went off and fought that war on behalf of this country, though we never understood it. Came home not to ticker tape parades or thank you for your service, indifference at best, put his head down, raised his family, worked that job, did everything he could to continue to serve this country. Found dead of hypothermia in his truck, trying to charge his oxygen tank because the electricity no longer worked in his home. This happened over 700 times across the state. And while that was happening, while your junior senator was at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun, Mexico, while your governor was on Fox News blaming windmills, he was also, Greg Abbott, ordered the price of electricity pegged at the highest allowable rate. That meant that gas started trading in Texas at 200 times the going rate. Some utilities went into bankruptcy. Others took billions of dollars on in debt. His buddies, these energy traders and pipeline CEOs, made $11 billion in illegal and immoral profit off the suffering of our fellow Texans. And if that was not bad enough, he has yet to fix the grid, and he's stuck you and me with the bill. Ratepayers across this state, on average, are paying $45 more per month. You add to that the $20 billion increase in your property taxes under Greg Abbott, and he's the single greatest driver of inflation in the state of Texas. There's an answer to that. We win this election. We weatherize the grid. We connect ERCOT to the national grid to pull down the power when we need it. And we take those bastards who stole the $11 billion from us to court and get every penny back and return it to the ratepayer. Are you with me? My last number for you. 8. It's been almost 8 years since Greg Abbott has been in the governor's office. 8 years. And everything that is a problem today in Texas is owned by that very governor. The fact that we are the least insured state in America. Now, what the hell does that mean? It means that more kids die of diabetes in Texas than any other state in the union. It means that our largest provider of mental health care services, those with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, clinical depression, their best chance at service, at care or help all too often is the county jail system in the state of Texas. It means that we're paying for uncompensated indigent care in our tax bills to county government or to the hospital district. And it means that our fellow Texans are not healthy enough or well enough to live to their full potential, to raise their families, to finish their education, to go to work, to create jobs by starting a business. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an answer to that. We win this election. We will bring back $10 billion a year of your federal income taxes from Washington, D.C. We will expand Medicaid, stand up more hospitals and clinics, attract and retain more providers in our communities, connect more people with care. And with Judge Clay Jenkins as my witness, we bring down your property tax bill in the bargain. You with me on this? Or how about CPS? Amber was talking about this. The consequence of the governor's threat against her and families like hers across this state is not only will she and her husband be arrested for child abuse, for loving and caring for and helping their child, as all of us who are parents want to do with our kids. But that child and every other kid in the house will be turned over to CPS care, where right now there are 32,000 kids in that system. One that is probably the worst run in the United States of America. But in case you have not seen the trend yet, Abbott has warned about a problem like the underlying frailty of the grid, does nothing. About the number of school shootings in the state of Texas, and does nothing. 7 years ago, warned by Judge Janice Jack that kids emerge from this foster care system more damaged than when they first went in, does nothing, so that in January of this year, that same federal judge says, hey, governor, that situation I described to you 7 years ago, it has gone from bad to worse. These young fellow Texans of ours who were taken from their families in so many cases, who were raised sometimes in the hallways, sleeping on the desks and under the tables of CPS offices, are literally the most vulnerable among us. And we do not lack for the resources to help them out. We're the 9th largest economy on the planet, a $2 trillion GDP. We just need somebody in a position of power who will elevate those who need it the most right now. We win this election. We fix CPS. Y por el último, you've got a governor today who has no track record on which to run, no vision to offer the people of this state. So he'll resort to trying to scare you, to make you afraid of your fellow Texans, about how gay they are, or how much of an immigrant they might be, or how different than you are, and you've got to be afraid, and you maybe even need to hate them. We understand that full well in El Paso, Texas. On the eve of a massacre that took 23 of my neighbors in August of 2019, Greg Abbott sent out a message to the state. He said, Texans, referring to immigrants who are coming to America at our border, said, we must defend ourselves. We must take matters into our own hands. There was a young man not too far from here in Allen, Texas, who heard a message like that loud and clear. Purchase an AK-47, a weapon originally intended for use in combat, because it is just so damn devastatingly effective at taking human lives, destroying all of the soft tissue, your organs, your vessels, your arteries. You bleed out before you can be resuscitated, revived, and survive. That's exactly what it's supposed to do on a battlefield or a theater of war. When he orders that gun, his mom calls the police. She says, I have no idea what my son needs with this weapon. She may also have signaled other signs of distress in this young man's life, but because we do not have a red flag law, because Greg Abbott won't listen to common sense, and because he has stoked and inflamed the hatred that was in that young man's heart, the cop said, ma'am, I'm sorry. You're on your own. Good luck. There is nothing that we can do. He drove that AK-47 650 miles to my hometown, posted online before he walked into that Walmart that he had arrived to repel the invasion of Hispanics who were going to replace him as a white man in this state. So let me tell you this. When you hear the fear-mongering from this demagogue, vilifying and demonizing immigrants at our border, talking about invasions, maybe parroting the language that Donald Trump used about an infestation and animals and rapists and criminals who are coming to get us, I just want you to understand the logical conclusion of what he's doing right now. And I also want us to understand that this one is also on us, because Republicans, Democrats, members of Congress, presidential administrations have failed to fix this challenge at our border, and they've left it open as an issue that can be used by people like Greg Abbott to distract you from the things that are really important or from the solutions that we deserve. So I commit to you this. We're going to replace busing migrants to Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois, and New York City, building 1.5 miles of wall, like that's going to do anything for anybody. Involuntarily activating 10,000 members of the Guard who right here in Denton didn't have but a week to say goodbye to their spouses, to their kids, to their careers for a 1-year involuntary deployment on the border. 8 of them have died so far. Not a single one killed by a migrant. Those who serve us in uniform deserve better from us. So we replace that with this. Hear me out. We say this: if you want to come to this country, you must follow our laws. On our side, we are going to upgrade our laws so that they reflect our values, our needs, and our reality here on the ground. If you want to work in Texas and you come from another country, we're going to do our best to ensure that there's a safe, legal, orderly path for you to do that. If you want to join family that you have been separated from, a safe, legal, orderly path. If you have traveled 2,000 miles seeking asylum and refuge in a country comprised of asylum seekers and refugees, we're going to make sure there's a safe, legal, orderly path for you to do that. And when we do that, and we remove everyone who wants to be able to do better for themselves, and by extension, they do better for all of us, all that is left are anyone who wants to do us harm, trafficking in illegal drugs, smuggling human beings. Right now, they are needles in a haystack. We address immigration from our perspective right here in Texas, bringing Republicans and Democrats alike together. That haystack is gone. All that is left is the threat. We'll be so much more successful at stopping it. Do you want to do this as the defining immigrant and border state in America? This is ours to get right, and we're going to do it. In 2020, this is my closing argument. In 2020, in Denton County, there were 123,000 voters who were eligible to cast a ballot in the most consequential presidential election in our lifetimes, and who didn't. Since then, there have been another 30,000 voters added to the rolls. We're approaching 170,000, 180,000 voters that we have yet to hear from, whose votes have yet to be counted. When I ran with you for the United States Senate in 2018, we together helped to produce the largest voter turnout in Texas history going back to 1970. Together. Together, we helped to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. 12 new Democratic state representatives replacing Republicans in those positions. Colin Allred and Lizzie Panel Fletcher flipping control of the United States House of Representatives in that year. 17 African American women elected to judicial positions just in Harris County. And the previous high water mark for a Democrat in Denton County in 2016 was 37%. 2 years later, we won 46%. My argument to you is if you will sign up with us today, and listen, you're busy. There's a lot going on in your life. You're taking care of your folks, raising your kids, going to work, finishing your education. You're volunteering for other campaigns and efforts, and you have my eternal gratitude for doing that. But 2 months and 1 day left, we must win this election. I ask you to take just one volunteer shift from one of these folks who are in the yellow reflective vests in the room. They've got the shifts laid out. We can find a time that is convenient for you. We're going to ask you to go onto the doors of those voters who've been the targets of suppression and intimidation. I'll tell you what, I know that this works. Colin knows that this works. The judge knows that this works. The future Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett knows that this works. That's how they won their elections. When I was up against an entrenched incumbent, outspent 5-1 in my race for Congress in 2012, I knew I was going to win because of our door-knocking strategy. As we came close to Election Day, a guy approached me in a restaurant on a Monday morning. He says, "Are you Beto O'Rourke?" I said, "I am." He said, "You knocked on my grandmother's door last Thursday. She invited you in. She bragged on her son, who's a Marine veteran, her granddaughter, who's a school teacher and is struggling mightily against the odds in that classroom. You sat there, Beto, you listened, you heard her story." Well, he said, when I and my 32 other cousins showed up at her house Sunday for menudo, she made each one of us promise to vote for you in this next election. He said, "Look, you're going to win this thing. So remember us going forward. Knocking on doors really works." And wouldn't it be wonderful if the very people targeted for suppression and intimidation provide our margin of victory on election night when we win Denton County for the first time and win the state of Texas for the first time in 32 years. You ready to win? You ready to get this done? You ready to do the work to win it? Les agradezco. Muchísimas gracias. We're going to hang out for a little while to say hello, to take pictures, and let's commit ourselves to knocking on those doors. Thank you, Denton, for coming out.
God bless Texas.